The sounds came from everywhere back then. They floated through screen doors on Saturday afternoons, poured from corner houses where someone had saved enough for a good stereo system, and filled the spaces between us when we gathered. Music was not background noise in black households during the 1970s. It was the heartbeat of daily life, the way we measured time and marked moments that mattered. Saturday mornings meant Soul Train, and Soul Train meant everything stopped. Chores could wait. Breakfast could get cold. When Don Cornelius appeared on that television screen with his smooth voice and perfect afro, families gathered like it was church. Children sat cross-legged on carpet remnants. Mothers paused their cooking, and even fathers who claimed they had no time for television found themselves lingering in doorways. The dancers moved down that line with such grace and confidence that it made you believe anything was possible. Every step they took seemed to carry a message about who we were and what we could become. Young people across the country tried to memorize those moves, practicing in their bedrooms and backyards until they got them right. The record player in the living room held treasures. Albums by Parliament Funkadelic sat stacked next to Earth, Wind and Fire, next to Stevie Wonder, next to Diana Ross. The covers alone were works of art, with photographs that made you want to become part of whatever world they represented. When someone put on September, the whole house transformed. Mothers would start moving their hips while they folded laundry. Children would abandon their toys and start dancing on whatever furniture could hold them. The bass line seemed to travel through floorboards and into your bones, making it impossible to sit still. Platform shoes were serious business. They were not just footwear. They were statements about who you intended to be when you walked out the door. The higher the platform, the closer to the sky you felt. Children watched their older siblings practice walking in them, wobbling at first, but determined to master the art of moving with confidence on those thick soles. The shoes clicked and clacked on sidewalks, announcing your arrival before you even appeared. Mothers would shake their heads but secretly admire the way their children carried themselves with such pride and purpose. Bell-bottom pants flowed like water when you walked, and when you danced, they became part of the rhythm itself. The fabric would catch air and billow out, making every movement look graceful and intentional. Children saved their allowance for months to buy one perfect pair, usually in a color that could be seen from across the room: burgundy, mustard yellow, forest green, or deep purple. The wider the bell, the cooler you were. Parents complained about the cost and the impracticality, but they understood what those pants represented: freedom, style, the right to take up space in the world. House parties happened in basements and living rooms where furniture was pushed against walls to create dance floors. The air would get thick with the smell of hair products and cologne, mixed with whatever somebody's mother was cooking upstairs. The music never stopped. When one record ended, someone was already reaching for the next one, keeping the energy flowing like electricity. Neighbors knew when a party was happening because the bass could be felt 3 houses away. But complaints were rare. Everyone understood that Saturday night was for celebration, for releasing the tensions of the week through movement and music. The radio stayed on from morning until night. Families had their favorite stations, and everyone knew the voices of the DJs who guided them through each day. These voices became like friends, introducing new songs and artists with enthusiasm that made you feel connected to something larger than your own neighborhood. Children would lie in bed at night with small radios pressed against their ears, discovering music that spoke to dreams they had not yet learned to name. The static between stations became part of the experience, the brief moments of silence that made the music even more precious when it returned. Fashion was creativity in motion. Mothers and grandmothers who could sew would create outfits that rivaled anything in store windows. Bright patterns mixed with solid colors in combinations that should not have worked, but somehow captured the energy of the times perfectly. Children learned early that clothes were not just covering for your body. They were ways to express who you were inside. A dashiki worn to school was a statement about heritage. A pair of perfectly pressed pants was a sign of respect for yourself and others. Dance moves had names and stories. The hustle, the bus stop, the robot, each one carried its own personality and required its own kind of skill. Children learned these moves the way other generations had learned folk songs, through observation and practice and the gentle correction of elders who had mastered the steps before them. Living rooms became dance studios where siblings taught each other, where cousins competed to see who could move the smoothest, where grandparents sometimes surprised everyone by showing moves from their own youth. Hair was art. The afro was not just a hairstyle, it was a declaration of natural beauty that challenged everything society had taught about acceptability. Children watched their parents and older siblings embrace these new ways of presenting themselves, learning that there was power in refusing to hide who you were. Hot combs still appeared on Sunday mornings, but increasingly they competed with picks and natural oils that enhanced rather than changed the hair that grew from black scalps. Beauty parlors became places of education where young people learned about pride as much as they learned about style. Television brought the world into living rooms, but it was Soul Train that brought black culture to the center of that world. Seeing young black people dancing with such joy and skill on national television was revolutionary for children who had never seen themselves reflected in media with such positive energy. The show proved that black joy was not something to be hidden or apologized for. It was something to be celebrated, shared, and spread as widely as possible. Concerts were religious experiences. Saving money for months to see Stevie Wonder or Diana Ross or James Brown was an investment in something that would live in memory forever. The anticipation began weeks before the show, with conversations about what to wear and who might be there, and what songs would be performed. Children who could not yet afford tickets would gather outside venues just to hear the music filtering through walls and to watch the well-dressed crowds arriving for the show. The energy was contagious, reminding everyone that music was not just entertainment, but a form of communion. Local talent shows brought communities together in ways that nothing else could. Churches, schools, and community centers would host these events where neighbors could showcase their abilities and support each other's dreams. Children practiced for weeks, perfecting dance routines or song performances that they hoped would earn applause from people they had known all their lives. The audiences were generous with their appreciation, understanding that every performer was someone's child, someone's hope for the future. Fashion magazines found their way into black households, but they were studied differently than they might be in other communities. Young people would examine the images not just for style inspiration, but for representation, looking for faces that resembled their own and celebrating when they found them. When a black model appeared on a cover or in a major advertisement, it became news that traveled through neighborhoods like important information. These images were proof that beauty came in many forms and that black faces belonged in spaces that had previously excluded them. The sound of records being changed created its own rhythm in black households. The careful lifting of the needle, the gentle placement of a new album, the brief moment of silence before music filled the room again, these small rituals were performed with the reverence of someone handling something sacred. Children learned early to respect vinyl, to clean it properly, to store it safely, because these records represented more than music. They represented culture, heritage, and the voices of people who looked like them. Neighborhood barbershops were more than places to get haircuts. They were cultural centers where the latest albums played constantly, where style trends were debated, and where young people learned about presentation and pride. The smell of hair tonic mixed with the sound of clippers and conversation created an atmosphere that was distinctly masculine and deeply cultural. Boys learned not just how to maintain their appearance, but how to carry themselves with dignity and confidence. Dance floors existed wherever music played. Living rooms, basements, church fellowship halls, school gymnasiums, any space could become a place for movement and celebration when the right song came on. Children learned that dancing was not about perfection, but about joy, about letting the music move through your body in whatever way felt natural and right. The best dancers were not always the most technically skilled, but those who danced with the most soul. Music brought generations together in ways that conversation sometimes could not. Grandparents who had lived through different eras would recognize rhythms and melodies that connected to earlier times, while children brought energy and new interpretations that kept traditions alive and evolving. These intergenerational moments around music created bridges between past and future, ensuring that cultural knowledge was passed down through sound and movement rather than just words. Record stores were treasure hunting grounds where young people would spend hours flipping through albums, looking for new discoveries, or saving money for releases they had been anticipating. The clerks in these stores often became cultural guides, recommending artists and albums that might appeal to specific tastes. Children would study album covers like textbooks, learning about visual art and graphic design while they absorbed the music contained within. Fashion choices were investments that required careful consideration. A new outfit might represent weeks of saved allowance or a special gift for a birthday or holiday. Children learned to care for their clothes with the understanding that replacements were not easily obtained. This care extended to how clothes were worn and presented, with iron creases and clean shoes being signs of respect for the effort that went into acquiring and maintaining these possessions. The voices on records became like family members, known so well that their songs could be sung along with perfectly, including every ad-lib and vocal flourish. Children would memorize not just lyrics, but the way certain words were pronounced, the way emotions were conveyed through tone and timing. These vocal styles influenced how young people spoke and expressed themselves, creating a distinctly cultural way of communicating that could be recognized across great distances. Evening hours brought different music to Black households. While daytime might be filled with upbeat funk and soul, evenings often featured smoother sounds that created atmosphere for family dinners and quiet conversations. The transition from day to night music was as natural as the changing of light outside windows, with families intuitively understanding how different rhythms served different purposes in daily life. Performance was part of daily life, not something reserved for special occasions. Children would create talent shows in backyards, using cardboard boxes as drums and hairbrushes as microphones. These informal performances were taken seriously by both participants and audiences, with neighbors gathering to watch and applaud. These experiences taught young people that entertainment was not something that happened to them, but something they could create for themselves and their communities. Community celebrations always centered around music and dancing. Whether it was a block party, a church anniversary, or a family reunion, the success of any gathering was measured by how well the music moved people and how much joy was created through shared cultural expression. These events were opportunities for different generations to learn from each other, for children to see adults at their most joyful, and for communities to reinforce the bonds that held them together. The influence of this music and culture extended far beyond entertainment. It shaped how young people understood themselves, their possibilities, and their place in the world. The confidence that came from seeing positive representations of Black culture. The pride that came from participating in traditions that were uniquely their own, and the joy that came from expressing themselves through music and movement, all contributed to a sense of identity that would last throughout their lives. These were not just memories of good times, but foundations for understanding what it meant to be part of a rich and vibrant culture that deserved to be celebrated and preserved. Roller skating rinks became temples of cool where young people gathered every Friday and Saturday night. The disco lights flashed in patterns that matched the music, creating an otherworldly atmosphere where ordinary teenagers could feel like stars. The rental skates smelled like disinfectant and other people's feet, but nobody cared once the music started and bodies began moving in circles around the polished wooden floor. The couple's skate was the moment everyone waited for, when the lights dimmed and slow songs played and nervous hands reached out to invite partners onto the floor. Watching someone glide effortlessly backward while holding someone else's hand seemed like magic to children who were still learning to skate forward without falling. Television variety shows gave Black performers chances to showcase their talents to national audiences, and families would gather to watch these appearances with the same excitement they reserved for church programs. When Gladys Knight and the Pips appeared on a variety show, mothers would call out to children in other rooms to come see. When James Brown did his famous cape routine, fathers would shake their heads in amazement at the showmanship. These appearances were more than entertainment. They were validation that Black artistry belonged on the biggest stages in the country. The Jackson 5 changed everything for young Black children who had never seen people their own age become superstars. Michael Jackson was not much older than many of the kids watching him on television, yet he moved with the confidence and skill of someone who had been performing for decades. Children would practice his dance moves in mirrors, trying to capture that smooth spin or that perfect glide across the floor. The sight of 5 young Black boys from Gary, Indiana, commanding attention on television screens across America proved that dreams were not just fantasies, but possibilities waiting to be seized. Beauty supply stores became gathering places where information was exchanged along with products. Women would spend long minutes examining new hair products, discussing their effectiveness with other customers, and store employees who understood the specific needs of Black hair. Children learned about self-care in these spaces, watching their mothers and older sisters invest in products that would help them look and feel their best. The walls lined with wigs and hairpieces represented different possibilities, different ways of presenting oneself to the world. Fashion accessories carried meanings that went beyond mere decoration. A carefully chosen hat could transform an entire outfit and announce something important about the person wearing it. Gold chains and rings represented success and style, saved for and purchased as symbols of achievement. Children learned to notice these details, understanding that presentation was a form of communication and that the way you put yourself together told the world how you wanted to be perceived and treated. Music magazines like Right On and Rock and Soul brought images and stories of favorite artists directly into Black homes. Young people would study every photograph and read every interview, learning about the personal lives and creative processes of the performers they admired. These magazines provided cultural education that was not available anywhere else, teaching readers about music history and introducing them to new artists who might become their next favorites. The magazines were passed around among friends until the pages were worn soft from handling. Dance contests at community centers brought out competitive spirits and creative talents that might otherwise go unnoticed. Children and teenagers would practice for weeks before these events, creating choreographed routines or perfecting freestyle moves that would impress judges and audiences. The competitions were serious business, with participants wearing their best outfits and bringing their most confident attitudes. Winning meant recognition and respect, but even participating meant belonging to something larger than yourself. Backup singers and musicians became familiar faces to children who watched performances carefully. The women in matching dresses who harmonized behind lead singers, the horn players who stepped forward for solos, the guitar players who made faces while they played. All of these supporting performers became part of the visual landscape of Black music. Children learned that success was often collaborative, that the stars they admired were supported by talented teams who helped create the magic they witnessed. Late-night music programs on television introduced older children to jazz and blues legends who had paved the way for current artists. These shows often featured interviews and intimate performances that revealed the depth and history of Black musical traditions. Young people learned about B.B. King and Muddy Waters and Count Basie, understanding that the music they loved had roots that stretched back through generations of creativity and struggle and triumph. The process of getting dressed for special occasions became ritual performances in themselves. Families would spend hours preparing for church services, parties, or concerts, with each member contributing to the overall presentation of the household. Children learned about coordination and style by watching parents choose accessories that complemented each other's outfits. The preparation was part of the celebration, building anticipation, and ensuring that when the family appeared in public, they represented themselves and their values with pride and dignity.